Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to virtually see those who've signed on today. Give you a quick introduction on myself. My name is Pierre Debbas. I'm a real estate attorney and founding partner of a boutique law firm in Midtown Manhattan called Debbas. We are a full-service real estate firm focusing on all transactional aspects of commercial and residential real estate in New York City, with a heavy emphasis on representation of buyers and sellers of property in the New York City area. About 40 institutional lenders in their commercial residential financing activities, active commercial leasing practice, and real estate related litigation group. We have a couple of nice complementary areas to our real estate practice in the firm, with trust and estates, tax, and we have an immigration practice, which is there to really assist our focus on representing buyers from overseas, which will be part of what I'll be talking about today with the recent travel restrictions lifted on Monday for overseas visitors. So going into this, what I wanted to really talk about, my subject was rather long, about COVID, evictions, moratoriums, what's going on in the world. I'm really going to cover a lot today from my perspective, what I'm seeing in the real estate market in New York City and nationally. And when we're going through this, I like to kind of rewind back in time to March of 2020. And the greatest saying of all time, which was, I should say, the most asinine saying of all time, is we said that let's shut down for 2 weeks, shelter in place, flatten the curve, go back to work. And here we are nearing 2 years, and that couldn't have been arguably the most false statement anyone's ever made in world history. And how's the world changed? We sat here, I don't know about all of you, but in owning a business and managing a business that focused on real estate, it was mortifying to think of what will happen to the real estate market if we are in this position for more than 2 weeks. And ironically enough, the real estate market in general, not every sector of the real estate market, retail and office have a lot of hurdles left ahead of them, but many other sectors of the real estate market, or the majority, have prospered tremendously in the last year and a half. And I think that's probably counterintuitive to what any of us would have predicted. If any of you predicted that would have happened, God bless you, a lot smarter than me. I'd love to hear what your predictions were in the comments section of the Zoom call. But when you look back at it, let's talk about where the spike in what portions of the real estate market started, and what ripple effects have they had in other sectors of the market. Now, the first thing took place, we all got accustomed to working remotely. One of the biggest question marks you have now is, what's the future landscape of office going to be? Because two factors: the workforce has gotten used to working remotely and does not want that to change. And at maximum, you're going to see hybrid policies implemented. I think very few industries are going to succeed in getting people back to the office permanently. That's number one. They've shown you they can do it. They like doing it. And what did that result in? It resulted in terms of a lot of scattering of people throughout the country. People picked up and relocated. People are still relocating at a rapid pace and saying, I can make potentially, let's take New York City, for example. I can make my New York City income, work remotely permanently, go live in a lower taxed and a lower cost living state, and take that extra money I had and now buy a home. And the first sector of the real estate market to really prosper was the housing market. The housing market I've had in my career, this has been in the last year, the highest value appreciation I've seen probably since this may even beat out what we saw during the financial crisis. I think your average home price appreciation throughout the country was 25% in the last year to year and a half. That's a staggering increase in a very short period of time. And what's been driving that? People saying, you know what, I'm going to go live in North Carolina. I'm going to go live in Texas, work permanently from there. Given the amount of money I just saved, I can afford to now buy a home. And it's now more valuable for me to buy a home because I'm going to also be working in this home, and it makes more sense. Couple that with interest rates. Just a couple of weeks ago, the 30-year fix was 2.8% or 2.88%. We're still living in an incredibly low interest rate environment. And whether interest rates go up significantly in the near future is to be determined. But I think a lot of people, the majority of, the demand, or people who would be home buyers, are very fearful that in the next year to two, interest rates will be up significantly. So that fear and anxiety over what rates will look like is also driving up the housing market, is causing that the housing market to maintain this level of demand and activity. I was just reading yesterday, the government with inflation is offering bonds at over 7% interest to investors. And you look at like how can the government afford to pay 7% interest on a government bond? What's that going to mean for home mortgage rates for home purchases? I don't know, but there's so many variables out there that are uncertain at the moment. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is kind of the housing market and how that's and why that's prospered so much as a result of COVID, and how COVID really catapulted one of the most aggressive housing markets we've seen in the country's history. Now that kind of leads to the next topic in terms of multifamily. Given the fact that majority of first-time home buyers right now are priced out of the marketplace. I think your average home price is roughly like $350,000 to $360,000 for your average home. Now, banks, the reason I don't believe we're in a bubble is that banks are requiring hefty down payments. Back in the day in 2008, during the subprime lending days, you were able to get 110% financing. The bank would even give you money to theoretically, improve the property, conduct renovations, just assuming that real estate was going to appreciate for perpetuity, and at some point they wouldn't be in a negative position from an equity perspective. You're not seeing any of that nonsense these days. Banks are lending at a healthy rate in a diligent manner. Underwriting is legitimate, and down payments are, in a lot of cases, minimum 10%, and that wasn't the case. So that's why I think a large part of the reason I wouldn't classify this as a bubble. And then what that's resulting in is those people who would love to be homeowners are being priced out, are now going towards, obviously, multifamily rentals. And a lot of the multifamily rentals, we're seeing the multifamily market very strong at the moment. There's been a healthy rent increase in multifamily. Banks have been aggressively still lending to multifamily properties. And when we have all these eviction moratoriums, the eviction moratorium in New York State, I believe the governor extended to mid-January of 2022. And I'm sure that'll get extended again. Keep in mind, if it gets extended for 2 more months, there'll be 2 years of no evictions in the state of New York. You would have thought, to go back to March 2020, if I would have told you this in March 2020, that you'll have a 2-year eviction moratorium, you would have thought there'd be a flood of foreclosures, a flood of loan defaults, a flood of distressed loan sales. We have not seen that. If any of you have seen that otherwise, please, I'd love to see put it in the message board. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But in practicing law as a real estate lawyer in New York, we have not seen any of that, which is completely counterintuitive to what you would expect a global pandemic with eviction moratoriums to be, for the outcome to become. Now, part of the reason for that is that government agencies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, have done an excellent job of telling their owners that if you work with your tenants who do need rent relief, rent assistance, that have suffered financial hardship due to the pandemic, we will work with you on your loan in terms of forbearance and re-amortizing the payments. So that's also been a big factor that why we haven't seen any major distress or any crisis in the market, because not like when you compare it to 2008 banks just went for foreclosure. Any default took place, they just went right away for foreclosure. You're not seeing that today. Banks are working with all the borrowers to basically, the good thing about this whole mess that we're living through, everybody, especially in our industry, is kind of working together to figure out how to navigate this. And I think that that's why you're seeing the real estate markets in such a healthy place at the moment, because of that predominantly. So multifamily, it's interesting to see. It's interesting to think, though, when you look at next year, can this trend continue, right? Like at some point, this whole mass, relocation among society throughout the entire country because of COVID is going to end, or maybe not end entirely, but slow down significantly. It's not going to continue forever. Inflation is a huge concern of ours. Can rents keep up with inflation? Real estate's always been viewed as a great hedge against inflation because rents go up, which helps hedge against a lot of your expenses increasing. But how long can that go on for? Right now, we are in the worst inflationary market that we've seen, one of the worst in the country's history. When are we going to really, at what point does that have a much more significant impact on the economy than what we're going through at the moment? Also, too, it's no secret that we have an issue in the labor markets. What's going to happen? Unemployment. Is unemployment going to get better? Is it going to get worse? It's getting better at the moment, according to the statistics, which should mean that the more people are employed, again, the multifamily sector benefits from that. And then when eviction moratoriums are in fact lifted, what's that going to look like? That's a great question. When I'm sitting here talking to, a lot of my personal perspective is based off of talking to people in the real estate industry, brokers, bankers, owners, everybody in town. And we really don't know what the real eviction demand is going to be because of these moratoriums that are in place. Again, I keep saying we're not hearing as many horror stories as you would think, but certainly once, the moratoriums are lifted in courts, or let's start with moratoriums being lifted. When moratoriums are lifted, you unequivocally will see an uptick in evictions, but courts are going to be so backlogged that how long is it going to take to possibly evict somebody? I mean, courts right now, where court cases are being held, just like we're talking today on Zoom, there's going to be such a massive backlog. We're advising everybody that has an issue with a tenant, work out whatever you can work out amicably. It's not going to behoove anybody to seek legal recourse, because by the time you pay for the expense of eviction, and by the time you go through the headache, and by the time you go through the whole, how many years it'll take at this point, no one's going to win. If your tenant really can demonstrate financial hardship, you have to provide assistance, whether you want to or not, whether you think it's the right thing to do or not. You don't really have much of a choice. And that's what we've been counseling a lot of people. And I think majority of the industry has taken to that mindset. And I don't think that you're going to see, millions of eviction cases filed in the state of New York, come January 16th, 2022. So from a multifamily perspective, it's been a pleasant surprise. In representing lenders, I can tell you the lenders have been, aggressively still lending towards multifamily properties, obviously with requisite amounts of reserves and conservative loan to value ratios and things of that nature. But it's been a good run for at least the last year. I think your two biggest question marks going into next year: what's going to happen with retail and office? It's no secret retail was in a precarious position before the pandemic. Now, I'm sitting here in Midtown Manhattan. My office on 40th and Madison, and I walk around Midtown every day in the Grand Central area. And about a month ago, the comptroller came out with a stat that 30% of Midtown Manhattan's retail real estate is vacant. 30%. That's a staggering percentage of vacancy. And what's gonna create the demand to fill up that space with the workforce? If I had to guess, depending on where you read, an average stat is roughly a third of people are back in the office in Midtown. I walk around, it depends on the day. There's days I call my partner and I'm like, hey, looks like it's half a 50% capacity now. This is great. And there's other days where you're walking around and it's 25, it looks like it's 25%. It depends day to day. I tell everybody, why will Midtown look different 12 months from now than today? And I always say, people are not working remotely now because of concerns of COVID. It's not concerns of the variant like we thought. That was our concern in August when a lot of major corporations pushed back their return to the office. Was due to all the discussion of all the variants that are out there. And now I think honestly, you're seeing the lack of people back in Midtown because of the desire not to ever commute 5 days a week again. And what's gonna get people back to the office more frequently? I think on average, you're looking in densely populated cities, you're gonna have no more than ever 2/3 of the workforce back on any given day. at some point, when the labor market shifted from the current trend that we're experiencing, people may want to show more face time for hopes of maybe learning, because let's be honest, learning on Zoom and virtually is challenging for anybody, and for hopes of promotions and progressing in their careers. At the moment, that's not really a factor. So that will get a part of the workforce back. But at the same token, employers, unless you're some of these, major corporations that have the ability to require you to come back daily, majority of employers are going to use this hybrid model in the remote component to recruit. I can tell you I'm doing it personally. I'm a small business owner. I own a business of, roughly 40 to 50 people. And we are offering, a hybrid remote component to everybody. It's a great recruiting tool. And I think that if you don't do it, unless, again, you're some of these major corporations, you will suffer as a business. And even the major corporations, I think inevitably you're going to lose talent if they really stick to this requirement to come in 5 days a week again. Now, if you don't have the workforce back to the extent to the capacity that we are accustomed to, how is that going to impact all the retail vacancies in business districts in any major city in the country? Even to break it down from without providing stats, just a very basic, observation as somebody, a professional walking around New York City. I go to get lunch, you go to any local deli, sandwich, salad place. Many used to have a line out the door with 50 to 100 people waiting. You go now, there's anywhere from 0 to 6 people waiting. It's a drastic difference that you see. And until more people come back, that's going to be probably the biggest question mark in our real estate market, is what will be the future of those retail spaces in densely populated areas. It's obviously been well documented and reported on that industrial real estate has increased significantly in the last couple of years, because even though we were going down the trend of gravitating more towards e-commerce before this, when everybody being home for 2 years only increased the demand for e-commerce. So who's benefiting? The Amazons of the world, So, how much will the retailers want, tangible physical space as opposed to more of an online presence, is something that we're not going to know for a number of years. So I don't see many comments in the chat. If anybody has anything that they wanted to, chime in on, I'm more than happy to, if I elaborate or, share my thoughts on any of your anecdotes as well. I see my old friend Al here talked about a lot of cash buyers driving the market, referencing the housing market. Al, you're 100% right. Over the summertime, there was I believe this third quarter of this year, we had about 25% of all home buyers were cash, which is the highest percentage I remember seeing, throughout the country. And it's largely because a lot of investors have gravitated towards buying single family homes for inflationary risks and also to ride the momentum of the market. And one thing I do want to add before I conclude, Monday was the travel restrictions were lifted for vaccinated visitors coming from overseas. Our market, especially those of us that are here in New York City, has prospered over the years from capital coming from abroad. And capital coming from abroad has been slow for, I'd say, in my opinion, about 4 years. And obviously it's cyclical. And I think now with the travel restrictions being lifted, you're going to see more capital flowing to our market from overseas, which if I am correct, and many of us in the industry feel this way, will only help continue the trend the upward uptick in activity in values for real estate moving forward. So that's everything I had. Thank you all for attending today. My info's in all the materials. If any of you have any thoughts, want to reach out anytime, please feel free. Anthony, thank you for inviting me to the expo. I think this is my 10th year doing this. Hopefully we will be doing this in person next year. You're doing a hell of a job navigating this new COVID world we're living in and doing this virtually. So I do give you my applause for that, and hope to see all of you in the near future. And thank you again.
Pierre, it was great. Of course, it's always great to have you and Michael, your partner. Do you want to say anything about your school before we conclude?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up. One of our projects where we took advantage of the downtime during the pandemic is that we created a very extensive online continuing education program and school called the New York Real Estate Center. If you go to our website, it's nyrecenter.com. And what this school provides is the ability for anybody who's looking to obtain a broker's license, both for residential and commercial real estate, to obtain their license through the school, all through online classes. And then once you have that license, or for those of you who are already licensed, it's a very extensive catalog of continuing education credits that you can choose from, where many of our subscribers and participants even take the classes for informational purposes, even when they don't need the credits. And then on top of that, we created a number of webcasts where we do kind of like we're doing now, where I talk about, me, my partner, and other real estate industry experts talk about various, up and coming trends and news that they're seeing in the marketplace. And we invite those who we work with on a regular basis to also be panelists, presenters, teachers for continuing education. And it's really great. So it encompasses everything from licensing to credits to just, sharing of information amongst experts and brainstorming in a way of us to remain connected in this world where we're still virtual. And again, my opinion is we're going to always have this virtual component as part of our lives. So definitely check it out. If you see, it's called, I see here, I'll put it in the message board. It is the New York Real Estate Center, and I'll put the website there as well. So Anthony, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, by all means. And Pierre, you will have everybody's email address, so you can have one of your assistants send that out to everybody. And we want to thank everybody who participated today. You take care, Pierre. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. And happy Veterans Day, everybody. Thank you.